Hello dear Odooers! At Apex Originals, we release a new B2B clothing and accessories collection twice a year. Right now, we are in the early stages of preparing our new autumn-winter line, the Urban Nomad collection. Our intern, Pierre, from the product development team has already started a spreadsheet with information about the manufacturing of these new styles. He needs to present it to his boss for sign-off. But the file is currently a bit of a work in progress and is asked for help. Unfortunately, Pierre hadn't seen the recent memo about using Odoo Spreadsheet for all our data analysis and reporting. So he created his spreadsheet in another tool. But that's actually the perfect opportunity for us to step in. In this tutorial, we'll use Pierre's file to demonstrate some of the basics of Odoo Spreadsheet. From accessing the app and creating or importing spreadsheets, to structuring, styling, formatting, analyzing, and presenting data. Let's get started. So, I'm here in my database, and the first thing to notice is that there is no spreadsheet app on the screen. That's because the Odoo Spreadsheet module is part of Odoo Documents. So let's open that app. Spreadsheets are stored in sections and folders, just like any other file in the Documents app. For more about navigating the Documents app, check out our official documentation. If we wanted to create a new spreadsheet, we just go to the section or folder where the spreadsheet should be saved. Let's say our Collections folder. Then we'd click on New, then Spreadsheet. We'll discard this since we are just going to upload Pierre's spreadsheet. To do that, we'll click on New again, then Upload, then we'll select our file. Right now, this is just an Excel format file that has been uploaded. But if we click on it, we can convert it to an Odoo spreadsheet. I'm fine with the source file being moved to the trash, so I will just click on Open with Odoo Spreadsheet. And now we have Pierre's spreadsheet right here in Odoo Spreadsheet. I'm not sure what Pierre intended with these colors and borders, so let's strip that away by just selecting those columns and clicking on the clear formatting icon here in the toolbar. That's better. Also, I can see in the title of the spreadsheet that Pierre has used an old name for the collection. The collection is just called Urban Nomads, so we'll delete the forever here. We'll also mark this spreadsheet as a favorite, so we can find it more easily in our folder. We still have a bit of work to do to make this file presentable, so let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is to convert this range of cells into a table. That's going to add some styling to make it easier to read and manage our data. Since one of the cells is already selected, all we have to do is click on the table icon here on the toolbar. There are various pre-configured styles available, and we could even configure our own custom style. But let's select this first orange one. We could still edit the style in this panel on the right side, but I think it looks fine, so let's close this panel. By the way, just like in any other spreadsheet tools, this toolbar directly above the cells offers shortcuts to many of the options that are also available via these menus just above. For example, if I click outside this table for a sec, then click Insert, we have this table option, which is exactly the same as the shortcut we used. Next, there are a few issues we need to fix in this table. Before we do, let's click here on 100% and increase the zoom a little to 110%, so we can read the text better. If we take a closer look at the first column, we can see that the height of some of the rows is a little off. To fix that, let's select all of the rows of the table, then double-click on the space between two rows. And there we go, all the rows are of the correct height. But now that we are at the bottom of our spreadsheet, I can see another issue. We've lost the header row that tells us what information was in which column. To make sure that doesn't happen again, let's go to the View menu, then Freeze, and let's freeze the first row. While we are still in cleanup mode, let's do something about this strange capitalization in this first column. Retyping these product names manually would take a long time, so we'll use the Odoo Spreadsheet formula to fix them. To do that, we'll need to insert a new column. We could click Insert, then Insert Column, then column right. But like I said earlier, there are often faster ways to do things. So with our column A selected, we can just right-click, then directly insert column right. Let's copy and paste our header to the new column. Next, in this first cell, we are going to insert a function. Functions are like pre-built formulas that perform specific calculations. Most standard spreadsheet functions are supported in Odoo, and there are often some specific Odoo functions that let you work with live Odoo data from your database. For this task, we need a function in the text category, which is called proper. Basically, it's going to correct the capitalization of the text in our cells. We want to correct the capitalization of the text in cell A2, so let's select that cell, then press Enter. And just like magic, every field in the column is automatically corrected. As you can see, all these cells contain a reference to the corresponding cell in the first column, which means that if we deleted column A right now, we'd have a problem. What we need to do is make sure column B contains the actual values and not a formula. So we click on the first value in the column, then use the keyboard shortcut Ctrl plus Shift plus down arrow to select all the values. Then right-click to copy, and we select here, paste special, then paste as value here. Now that these cells have a fixed value, we can safely delete that first column via the right-click menu. Lastly, just like we froze our header row earlier in this tutorial, let's freeze our product name column so it's always visible when we scroll to the right. To do this, we can click View, then Freeze, and freeze one column. Before we can start working with our data, there are still a few formatting issues to fix. First of all, if we look at the headers, you'll notice that we can't read all the text in these last few columns. But since our spreadsheet already has quite a few columns, we don't want to just make the column wider. Instead, let's make the headers appear over multiple lines so we can read everything. To do that, we'll select the entire row, then click on the little wrapping icon on the toolbar and select the middle one to wrap the text. That's better. Next, I noticed that Pierre is using the American date format here in the earliest delivery date column. However, our company officially uses British English. And indeed, if I hover over this little blue globe in the top right corner, I can see there's a difference between the original settings of my own user profile, which is ENGB, and the original settings of the spreadsheet, which is ENUS. So let's open the spreadsheet settings by going to File, then Settings, and we'll change the local to English UK. Now, all the dates use the English format. Also, if you notice, the little blue globe we saw earlier disappeared, since the spreadsheet local is now the same as my own. These settings can be changed by the owner of a spreadsheet or anyone with editor access, and they apply to the spreadsheet itself. So like this blue banner explains, every user who accesses this spreadsheet sees exactly the same thing, irrespective of the language setting on their own user profile. We cover roles and permissions in more detail in our documentation and other tutorials, so be sure to check those out. Now that we've tidied up the spreadsheet, we are ready to actually work with the data. Pierre asked us to do two things. First, to calculate the profit margin of each style and identify any styles that might be too expensive to produce. Secondly, he wants a breakdown of the collection by category and subcategory to make sure we don't have too many or too few products in one subcategory. So let's start with the profit margin. Here, at the end of our spreadsheet, Pierre has added the cost price of each style as well as the price at which we'll sell it to a wholesale client. So let's come here and type profit in percent and press enter. Because we converted our data into a table earlier, the table just expands for a new column. This calculation is going to be a simple mathematical one, so we don't need to insert a function like before. I just need to type equal, then open brackets, then select the selling price minus the cost price, close my bracket, divided by the selling price, and press enter. To turn this number into percentages, we'll just select the column, then click Format, Number, and then percent. So in theory, this is what Pierre wanted. However, it's hard to gain any real insights like this. To make it easier to read at a glance, we'll add some conditional formatting to highlight the outliers. Let's select the column again, then click Format and Conditional Formatting. Let's first scroll to the right so we can see better which products correspond to which profit margin. And then we'll click Add another rule. Our range has been selected automatically. At Apex Original, we aim for a profit margin of minimum 35%. So let's keep this single color and say that the cells should be formatted if they are less than 35%. And these cells should be bold with a red background. And then we can click on Save. Now, at a glance, we can see the products where the margin is lower than it should be. So we can either rethink the style or try to negotiate with our suppliers. The margin on these Weekender duffel seems extremely low. So let's select the cost of this product, then right-click and insert a comment to ask at Pierre, here, is this cost correct? And press enter. The last thing Pierre asked us to do was to provide a breakdown of the collection by category and subcategory to make sure it's balanced enough. For this, we'll create a pivot table, which will help us group the data and draw some insights. So we'll select the entire table, and we can do that easily using the shortcut Ctrl-A, then Insert and Pivot Table. Since we're working with data we already have here in our spreadsheet, we select From Range. It's also possible to create a pivot table using live Odoo data from our database, and we'll cover that in another tutorial, so check it out. As soon as we've said we want to create a pivot table from a range of data, we're taken to a new sheet in our spreadsheet. And here on the right side, we can actually start to build this pivot table. First, let's give it a name, Products by Category. Next, we need to decide how to group the data. In other words, which dimensions will be shown as rows on the left of the pivot and as columns across the top. Ultimately, we want to know how many products are in each category and subcategory. So here, beside rows, let's click Add. And then we'll first select the category, and then I will do the same again by selecting the subcategory. Our pivot table is starting to take shape. We only want to know how many products names are associated with each category and subcategory, so actually we don't need any columns. We just need to add a measure, which really just means that we are calculating. And we just want a count measure, in this case, of the product. So now in our pivot table, we can see that 17 of our products are accessories and 23 are items of clothing. And for each, we can see a breakdown by subcategory. Urban Nomad is an autumn-winter collection, so it makes sense to have quite a lot of outerwear styles. But maybe these shorts are a little out of place for the time of the year. If we wanted to make this breakdown more visual, we could, for example, select the data for a clothing subcategory and then click Insert and then Chart. I think a pie chart would be better here. So under Chart Type, I can select the pie. Then in the Design tab, we can add a chart title. So let's add Clothing by subcategory. And let's add a legend to this chart on the right of a chart. Lastly, we'll update the name of the sheet to Products by category. This way, Pierre's boss knows what he can find here. Well, we've done what Pierre asked us, but a few colleagues from other departments will need to contribute to this spreadsheet before it's ready to be shared with Pierre's boss. So let's click on Share in the top right corner to define the access rights. If you remember, we uploaded this spreadsheet into the Collections folder. All the colleagues we see here have full access to that folder and its content. So by default, they have editor access to this spreadsheet too. However, I could change that for this specific spreadsheet if I wanted by removing a member or clicking Editor, then selecting Viewer. But right now, we want to be able to share a link to the spreadsheet with colleagues outside our own team. So here in General Access, we'll say that internal users who receive the link can access as editors. Then we save and we copy the link. Sharing a spreadsheet that does not contain any live Odoo data is just like sharing any file in the Documents app. For more about that, check out our official documentation. We'll also cover access rights to spreadsheet, including spreadsheets that contain live Odoo data, in more detail in another tutorial later in this e-learning course. Well, that's it for this tutorial. We've covered some of the basics of Odoo Spreadsheet, and as you saw, it offers the same kind of functionality as any other spreadsheet solution. One powerful feature we didn't touch on is how you can insert and work with live Odoo data in a spreadsheet, but you'll find plenty of information about that in other tutorials in this series. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one.